Welcome back to another episode of Silent Pals Go to the Movies. This is another Throwback Thursday review, and I'm here with my friend Touly. Say hi, Touly.
Hello, everyone.
And today we're going to be reviewing All the President's Men, and just a fair warning, there's going to be spoilers up ahead, so you've been warned. The Washington Post reporters Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein uncovered the details of the Watergate scandal that leads to President Richard Nixon's resignation. My first pro is the cast, of course. It's always a kick to see actors in older movies and connecting them to newer movies that I've seen. For example, we have Robert Redford, who played Woodward in the movie. I've seen him in a more recent movie called The Old Man with the Gun. I highly recommend that. Particularly just fascinated how they recorded it in the aspect ratio and the color tint they had in the movie was amazing. I loved it. Also, we have Dustin Hoffman, who plays Bernstein, compared to the newer characters that we know, sort of, let's say, Bernie Fokker from the Meet the Fokker series. Also, the late Ned Beatty, who played Dardis from Florida. He was in the movie with Mark Wahlberg, The Shooter. He played the senator of Montana. Every time I see people in secondary roles and stuff from old movies, comparing them to their new roles in current movies, I really enjoy that. So yeah, the caliber of these lead actors in this movie was quite amazing. My next pro was that the movie was released a few years after the scandal. The scandal basically took place between 71 and 73, and the movie actually came out in 1976. So the turnaround was rather quickly if you think about the scandal, then the book, then the script for the movie, and the movie came out. Plus, the idea that the facts that were told were from the book and they were pretty much as accurate as we can tell, because the writers for the book were actually the reporters. Which brings me to my next point. The story follows how the two reporters, Woodward and Bernstein, not knowing what they have at first, they keep following breadcrumbs till they basically get the bigger picture, which leads to what we all know, the Watergate scandal, which brought down Nixon. The movie to me seemed like it was a chase movie, but the time span that it took from the characters finding peace and clues to basically at one point, almost close to the end of the movie, when Deep Throat said your lives could be in danger, what reporters have to go through, sometimes things get out of hand and some people end up dying or going missing. Which brings me now to my cons. This movie is not a substitute any school book textbooks, since it's cited from the reporter's point of view. We see what they found, and thanks to Deep Throat, they got clues. When the real story, we don't see the president's side, what he had to do or what he was trying to cover up, or we even hear about the Nixon's tapes, which is basically his recording in the Oval Office, having conversations with people to cover up the story, which were actually subpoenaed in the real life case. So we don't see this in the movie. So it's a one-sided movie. I believe that it's a supplemental material for an actual class that's learning about the Watergate scandal and they want to see from the reporter's point of view. But I don't think that it's everybody who doesn't know about the Watergate scandal, show them the movie and then that's it. There's different points of view. There's different gears in motion that went through. And plus, the movie seems like it's not that long, but it actually is that the reporters were working on this article or articles. It's basically their point of view, which brings me to my next con, which is the length of the actual film. To me, it seemed like it was quite long, especially since their action scenes was mostly of them like typing or, going to interview people. There's no big chase scenes and there's no gunshots or anything. It's mostly real investigation done by reporters. So that could be slow for some people, but for me, I think the characters developed throughout the story. At the beginning, they didn't see eye to eye. They were polar opposites, but then when they were on the case, they found common grounds to proceed with it. And by that, they actually developed more as characters. And I got to be fond of the two characters. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to my friend Touly and see how he saw the movie and what grade he gave the movie.
I guess to start out with, it's funny that we're reviewing this movie because it reminded me of a Simpsons episode where there was a cover-up for Sideshow Bob winning an election. And I found it interesting just because of how the whole Nixon Watergate scandal has been referenced in so many ways in pop culture, and The Simpsons isn't alone in that. It just reminded me of that particular episode and how Smithers was sort of representing that Deep Throat character as Bart and Lisa were on the case to find out the suspicious activity that allowed Sideshow Bob, I guess in this case it's supposed to be Nixon, to win the elections. Just wanted to throw that out there as a fun fact because I am a fan of The Simpsons. But back to the movie here. Sal mentioned a lot of stuff that I agree with. The two main characters, Bernstein and Woodward, they really carried the movie despite the film being as long as it is. And to be quite honest, for being as long as it is and not having a lot of stuff happen. Like Sal mentioned, it's just a lot of investigative work and there isn't any chase scenes or action scenes. So you won't go on this thrill ride when these characters are digging too deep, going to places where they shouldn't be going. The only time that maybe there was some tension or some sort of indication that their lives could be in danger, it was when Woodward was informed by Deep Throat that their lives was in danger. And so that was the only point in the movie where I sort of felt, oh, okay, so there could be severe consequences for them not dropping the case, so to speak. Even when a few of the people who they have interviewed have seemed to have been scared for their life because they were doing stuff that were either out of their character or just being the holder of knowledge, and that if they ever were to reveal this said knowledge, that their lives could be in jeopardy. But because Woodward and Bernstein were so fixated on getting to the truth, I felt like their characters didn't really realize that their lives were in danger, despite when these people who they were talking to for information were already indicating how scared they were. I wish that aspect of their characters could have been more apparent throughout the film and sort of led them to maybe doubting whether or not they should continue to do what it is they're doing. Just give me a little bit more, because I would have found that to be believable if that was the case, versus it just being a throwaway towards the end of the film where they have already come that close to getting the information they need to release a press that would pretty much change the course of the presidential history. So that's something that I would like to see. I think this is one fascinating thing about the film. It felt that Bernstein and Woodward, I don't want to generalize this, but based on their characters, they really portrayed the sort of technique or the length that they would go to get information from people. And in many of these instances, they try to empathize or sympathize with that person's personal livelihood. Whether you're the father of a upcoming newborn child and you play to that tone to allow that person to connect with you and open up to you, to just having a conversation over coffee with somebody and just trying to get information despite how much coffee you would drink, that sort of a thing. I did find that fascinating, but I'm trying to imagine myself from the perspective of being somebody whom these guys are trying to get information from. And even though I realized that what Woodward and Bernstein was trying to do was for the greater good, that one lady who spoke to them about who were they to come to her house and interrogate her for information that would go against the person who she supports, despite, of course, what Nixon did being wrong, what she said there did strike me. I think of all the people who they were trying to get information from, she was the character who really stood her ground. So that particular scene did stand out to me. It's moments like those that they could have dropped in more to just show some sort of doubt in these characters, in Bernstein and Woodward, to acknowledge that, you know what, we may seem like the bad guys right now because we are prying to people's lives, but we feel that what we're doing is right. And so that encourages them to keep pushing forward. I would have preferred like a scene where they really focused on that side of their character. Otherwise, they were able to obtain the information they needed to, that resulted ultimately in Nixon's resignation. So yeah, I agree with Sal. Like, this is definitely just a supplementary to all the other major points that weren't covered in the movie revolving around the Watergate scandal, but maybe it just gives you as an audience a perspective from an investigative perspective of two guys who works for the news industry. Overall, the film was alright. I think they should have watered down some of the content that maybe was too repetitive, so that the overall runtime of the film could be maybe around that hour 30 to like hour 45 minute mark. Because for a film that's 2 hours long, as I mentioned earlier, I felt like not a lot of stuff happened. I don't know if because this was based on a book, I believe that they wanted to include certain stuff from the book and not tamper too much with it. I haven't read the book. If the vision was for them to not deviate too much from the book, then there's not much I can say to that. But if they were able to go about it in a more creative fashion, then I feel like maybe the runtime would have been less, with more to say within that limited time. But overall score of the movie, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. Like I said, it's not one of your tip-the-mill action or thrilling sort of investigative type of film, but I think it did its job in allowing you to follow two characters who are trying to get to the bottom of something, and they did.
I agree with Touly, especially about the fact that their life was in danger came too late in the movie. I would have liked it if every time they went somewhere, have somebody in the corners, like with a newspaper, just watching over them, and they'll be like, who's that? It's like, it's them. For the people who are being interviewed, they're afraid. Why? Because there's people following them and following the reporters. So show us that. Show us why these people are afraid to even say or acknowledge or be seen with the reporters. That way we know that there's probably some danger lurking around the next corner for the reporters. When is it going to happen? Are we going to see it? Add a little more suspense into the movie that way. This movie, to me, it's not the best. It's a one-sided thing. We see it from one point and it's a little long. Like Touly said, it could have been a little shorter. So my grade is probably going to be, a little higher than Touly just because they do reference this in The Simpsons. So my grade for this movie is going to be a 7.5 out of 10. So I guess that does it for this review of All the President's Men. Please join us next time where we're going to review Blazing Saddles.
Well, if you're the kid, then show me something.
Oh, well, maybe a couple of years ago I could have shown you something, but today, look at that.
Steady as a rock.
Yeah, but I shoot with this hand.
Please like, comment, and subscribe. You can find our social media links below. And like always, keep watching movies.